Thank you for tuning in to the GSMC Basketball Podcast presented by the GSMC Sports Network. I am your host, Nelson, here on this Monday afternoon. Hope you guys enjoyed the weekend. It was full of football. I didn't enjoy the weekend. Well, I did all the way up until the Giants started to play. And yeah, if you wanna hear more about the Giants, we have tons of football podcasts. We also have tons of sports podcasts, which I recommend that you guys listen, especially now because there's a lot going on in the NFL. There's a lot going on in football that I really would like to talk about, but I can't because we are a basketball podcast. That being said, though, there was a lot of things that actually went on in the basketball world this weekend. And it's not just football, even though the biggest news is football. And that's exactly what we're going to get into in this podcast for today. So in the first segment, we are going to talk about two WNBA records that were just recently broken over this weekend. And I'll just talk a little bit about that and explain, the reason, how the season's been going, what this means, and what it could mean for the WNBA. Basically, the basic things that I've been saying for a majority of the time with the WNBA. And then in the second segment, I'm going to talk about CBS releasing a list of the top 30 coaches in the NBA right now. So I'm just going to go ahead and talk a little bit about that. And then in the third segment, there was an article that I looked at which was titled LeBron's Shortcomings, and an NBA veteran gives his opinions on that. So I'm just really curious exactly what the article is saying, and I'm really I just want to list my opinions about this article. And I just figured it would be an interesting conversation because it's about LeBron. We all know LeBron is one of the more alienating players in the NBA. You either love him or you hate him. And then in the fourth segment, and maybe going into the fifth segment, I'll talk about the players on every single team that have the most to prove going into this season. And so that's probably going to be a fourth and a fifth segment. Stay tuned for that towards the end. And before I begin with the first segment, I'd like to remind everybody that we love to hear what you guys have to say during the show. Whether you guys have a hot take or a burning question, we're all ears. And if you really want your comment or question to get noticed, you can use Super Chat and click the $ just below the chat box. And then you can send in your donations and comments that way. It really helps the show. If Super Chat isn't really your thing, you can always use the link displayed below in the description, or the link displayed in the ticker, gsmcpodcast.net, and you can donate to the show that way. Either or really helps the show. We really appreciate all the support that you guys give us for this channel. And without further ado, let's go ahead and get into the first segment, which is going to be talking about WNBA record breakers, because there were two people that broke records towards over this weekend while football was going on. And I mean, it's really super impressive what these females have been doing, and this season in the WNBA has really awoken a lot of basketball fans, and a lot of people now realize, ooh, the women's basketball team, the women's basketball, it's really fun to watch. And obviously a big reason of that is because of Caitlin Clark. And I will say, despite Caitlin Clark's talents, the rest of the league in the WNBA also is full of talented players. But Caitlin's attention that she brings towards the game immediately opens up all of these other WNBA athletes to a whole new repertoire of fans. So it's people that wanted to watch Caitlin are now going to be, whenever Caitlin goes up against somebody like Aja or Brenna Stewart or Sabrina, or somebody else that isn't entirely well known in the WNBA and doesn't get that much media attention, they're going to gain fans just because they played against her. And really, that's something that I just thought that the WNBA players would understand, but a lot of them really don't. And it's it upsets me, but at the end of the day, a lot of these women, they do deserve the respect that they get. And I also want to let it be known, and for those of you guys on the audio section, you guys, you won't be affected by this at all. But I do get held up in meetings a lot because we do talk a lot of football. And that's one of the big reasons why I tend to be late at these 12:30 live streams. When I should be here at 12:30, I'm in a meeting, and that's the big reason. And it's crunch time. So that's I apologize for like, being late 9 out of 10 times, but it's like I can't really leave the meeting until I do this or I do that. But aside from that, the record that were broken, because I might as well talk about them. So first, A'ja Wilson. She has become the first ever WNBA player in the history of the WNBA to score 1,000 points in a single season. It's never been done before in the WNBA. And a lot of you might be thinking, oh, why hasn't it been done before? Well, it's because the amount of games that the WNBA plays compared to the amount of games that the NBA plays is so tiny. And because of that is the big reason why you don't really see that many 1,000-point scorers in the WNBA, because the sample size just isn't enough for that. That being said, getting 1,000 points this is a very, very impressive accolade, and it really goes to show you just how much of a well-rounded player A'ja Wilson really is in the WNBA. She can basically do everything. I mean, if you want to call her the WNBA's LeBron, I mean, you totally can go right ahead, because she does have the points production. She's able to pass the ball pretty well. She's also able to rebound the ball very effectively. And she has such an all-around game. It's like, by far, she's most likely going to win the MVP for the WNBA. I would be very surprised if it was anyone else to be named the MVP. And really, like, the only other player that I could probably see winning the MVP over A'ja is Caitlyn, simply because of, for a couple of reasons. So, one, the hype around Caitlyn is huge, so I wouldn't be surprised if the voters sway the vote in Caitlyn's favor. And two, the Fever are actually a playoff team now for the first time, and it's all because of Caitlyn. And, that represents value, whether you guys like it or not, whether you're an Angel Reese fan or not. Making it to the playoffs on your first year as a rookie represents value. It's exactly why CJ Stroud in the NFL won the Offensive Player of the Year, Rookie Offensive Player of the Year, because of the value that he brought to the Texans franchise. And, obviously, it's a completely different league, but still, it's more or less, it's the same idea. And speaking of Caitlyn, she also, of course, she also broke a record over the weekend. She recently broke the rookies' single season. She set a new record for rookies in single season points. So right now, this is the best rookie season in the WNBA in terms of scoring. She breaks so many records, you can't even keep up with how many that she's broken. But this is just another one to her resume. She is now the rookie scoring. She set the rookie scoring record at, I believe, I don't know exactly how many points she has. We still have to wait until towards the end of the year to see how much she finishes with. But as of right now, and the fact that she's doing this and still has a couple more games to be played is nothing short of impressive. And in the last game, actually, in the most recent game that the Fever played in, Caitlin Clark dropped 35 points, 8 assists, 3 rebounds, and was also able to accumulate 3 steals as well. And in her entire rookie season, she has ranked first in points, first in assists, and first in 3-pointers. This has never been done. So, she breaks a record, it feels like every other week. And what she's doing is nothing short of impressive. She's just amazing. And really, the saving grace for the WNBA. Because without her, I don't think this entire thing would have even been possible. And records are meant to be broken, and once people see that records are being broken, then people are going to want to pay attention. It's a skeptical. You love to see it. And quite frankly, I think, aside from A'ja, Caitlyn could be in the running for the MVP for reasons that I said before. But I do think A'ja is going to win it unanimously because, she's just having a phenomenal season. Now, Caitlyn, she's most likely going to win the Rookie of the Year award. She's most likely going to win it unanimously. I have no idea if there has been a WNBA rookie that has won the Rookie of the Year award unanimously before. No idea whether or not that has happened, but I wouldn't be surprised if she wins it unanimously because she has definitely delivered on everyone's expectations. And it's the same thing. It's literally just Wembanyama all over again, really, just for the WNBA. I mean, when Wemby first entered into the league, I was just banking on him. He was without a doubt going to win Rookie of the Year. The question was whether or not he was going to win it unanimously. And he ended up winning it unanimously. And what really helped him was the matchup against Chet Holmgren, who was the runner-up to the Rookie of the Year at the time. And really, all the hype around Wembanyama just ended up being true, similar to how the hype around Caitlyn is going to be true. So, same thing that I said about Victor. The question isn't going to be whether or not she's going to win Rookie of the Year. Now the question is she going to win it unanimously? And I think she is. Given Angel Reese's injury and how she's not playing, she was the runner-up. And Caitlyn not only has been able to outplay her in a majority of the games, and not only does Caitlyn have a better record than her in some of these games, but she's just having a better season. Now, Angel, obviously, yes, she did set the record for most rebounds in an entire WNBA season, which is probably what's going to prevent some voters from voting for Caitlyn and thus preventing her from winning the award unanimously. But if the voters were really thinking about it, Caitlyn should win this award unanimously. It should not even be close. And I know, the injuries, barring injuries, maybe she wouldn't have won it unanimously, but you also have to remember your best ability is your availability. And it's that simple. And I'm sorry to say it, but it's if you're just not available, you don't deserve to win the award, plain and simple. But that's all I have to say in this. That's all I have to say in this first segment. So now I'm going to go ahead and go into the next segment where I talk a little bit about the top 30 coaches in the entire NBA. So I'll be right back after this short break. So be sure to stay tuned for that.
I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind? Please, Lord, give me a sign, a sign. I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind? Please, Lord, give me a sign, a sign.
I wanna be the greatest. Everybody on the fake shit. I look around and feel like everybody is the fakest. I make this every day and I'm impatient, hoping one day I blow up from the basement. Statement, the top is so vacant. I don't hear shit that I think is amazing. Waiting for my day when I'm playing sold out shows for 1,000 faces. Hey, give me that crown. Get in my way and to be put down. It ain't your place, all this my town. If I want that shit, then I'll get it right now. I'm losing it, the noose it fits. Some losing shit, a stupid myth. You choose to live or choose to dip. You choose to fight or lose your grip and lose a gift. Oh.
I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind? Please, Lord, give me a sign, a sign. I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind?
And we are back with the second segment of the GSMC Basketball Podcast presented by the GSMC Sports Network. And in this second segment, we are going to be looking at the list of the top 30 coaches in the NBA according to CBS Sports. And I'm going to list all of them, and I'm going to give my opinions on all of them and whether I agree with them being ranked, whether I don't agree with them being ranked here, whether I don't, and this, that, and the other. Just giving my opinions, and let me know in the comments whether or not you agree, whether you guys don't agree. And before I begin, however, I do like to remind everybody that we love to hear what you guys have to say during the show, whether you guys have a hot take or a burning question, something you just wanted to say. We are all ears. And if you really want your comment or question to get noticed, then you can go ahead and use Super Chat, and you can send in your donations and comments that way. And your comment is guaranteed to get featured on the show. And if Super Chat isn't really your thing, you can always use the link displayed below the ticker, GSMCpodcast.net, and you can go ahead and send in your comments or donations that way. Either or really helps the show. And without further ado, let's go ahead and break down this list of the top 30 coaches in the NBA. Now, this list is, you can look up the article on CBS Sports, but here I have, you could also see the full list and, with all the names and all the teams a little bit better on Instagram. If you look at Sideline Sources, they recently just posted the top 30 coaches, and if you really want to know who they are and like where they're ranked, you can go ahead and look at the post that way. But the CBS article that's pulled up right here actually has them in tiers. So there's tier 9, then there's tier 8, and then there's tier 7, and there's tier 6, and they're in groups of 5. And so then after tier 6, then there's tier 5, which is its own tier for some reason. Like, the tiers have names as well, which I find really odd. So like tier 9 is called We Don't Know Enough, so like, the inexperienced coaches. Tier 8 is the coaches that you wouldn't be enthused over. And let's see, tier 7 is the coaches that look promising, but it's just a little bit early. Tier 6 is the coaches that are sort of in the middle of the pack, like, in the middle of the road. And then tier 5 is just one. It's only saved for Greg Popovich for some reason, and the tier 5 is literally called Living Legend. So I guess he's only in the mid tier just because of his reputation, which doesn't really make any sense. Then there's the tier 4, which are the obvious floor raisers. Tier 3, Wonderkins. Tier 2, the elites. And then finally tier 1, which is by far the best in the entire NBA. Now, before I go ahead and list off all of them, there is somebody in the chat, Monanzo. What's going on? He has a question. Do you think WNBA is ever going to try another team in Miami? Or because the last team was a failure, it's never going to happen? And Spo is number 1. That's the undisputed king. That is the tier 1, by the way. And no, I don't think the WNBA is going to try expanding over back to Miami. Or in Florida, excuse me. I'm not a big fan of teams in Florida just because of like all the things that you can do in Florida, and on top of that, drafting also becomes a problem, which is a big reason why I don't want there to be a team in Las Vegas. I don't want an NBA team in Las Vegas, and I'm not a big fan of the fact that the WNBA has a team in Las Vegas. I just don't really like Vegas having a team, just because there comes so many problems. Like, just imagine an 18-year-old in Vegas being drafted and just getting a check. Like, that just spells disaster in my head. And you would need a very competent coach, a very competent organization to be able to keep those people in check. And we see this happen all the time with the NFL. Like the Raiders, there's like a whole curse going on with the Raiders, and how they just can't seem to hold some of their talent, or they always get something bad just strikes them randomly, and which is one of the big reasons why I wouldn't want a team in the NBA. And that is a lot of questions. What can you hold it against the team that there's other stuff to do? That's not a fair thing to do, and I totally understand that. I just wouldn't want that. I genuinely wouldn't want that, because like that's just way too much to manage, and it's unnecessary to manage that. Like you're here to play. You're not here to babysit. You're here to win, and it's like it just rubs me the wrong way. That's just my opinion. But back onto the list of the top coaches in the NBA. I'm just gonna list them I'm just gonna list all of them 1 through 30, and I'm not gonna even bother with the tiers as of right now. So 1 is Eric Spoelstra, 2 is Nick Nurse, 3 Rick Carlisle, 4 Steve Kerr, 5 Tyronn Lue, 6 Mark Daigneault, forgive me if I messed up that last name, 7 Will Hardy, 8 Ime Udoka, Mike Budenholzer, and Tom Thibodeau. Now, I know exactly what you guys are thinking. Where the heck is the coach for the Boston Celtics? Well, he's not in the top 10, and that is immediately a no. Bad list, terrible list. Makes zero sense why the coach that literally just won the NBA championship is not in the top 10. Like, I'm sorry to say this, but the fact that they have Udoka in the top 10 instead of the Boston Celtics coach makes absolutely zero sense. They should flip-flop the list between those two at least, because the Joe Mazzulla for the Celtics was responsible for a lot of rotations, and once Kristaps ended up going out, he needed to be responsible for that rotation and sort of fill in the gap while Kristaps was missing. And throughout most of the postseason, like, they were phenomenal. Like, I understand, like, the team is great, but the coach was also fantastic as well. And the fact that he's not getting any respect on this list and being ranked just short of the top 10, I don't think it's fair. So, like I said, he's 11th, and the coach right underneath them is Chris Finch. Mike Brown is 13th. Greg Popovich is 14th, so he's like right in the middle tier, which was the tier that I was talking about before. Number 15 is Michael Malone. Number 16 is Quinn Snyder. Number 17 is Taylor Jenkins. 18 is Jason Kidd. 19 is Jamal Mosley. 20 is Willie Green. 21 is Kenny Atkinson. 22 is Doc Rivers. 23 is J.B. Bickerstaff. 24 is Billy Donovan. And in the final parts of this list, you have the sort of inexperienced coaches, or the coaches that are, it's just too early to tell. So this is the last 5 is the final tier on CBS, which is we don't know enough. And I mean, Chauncey Billups for the Blazers is actually, like, I feel like we know enough for that. He's number 25, and he's really not been that great over there. 26 is Darko Rajakovic, and he's relatively new, so we don't really know much about him. Jordi Fernandez for the Nets, again, another new coach. Charles Lee, relatively new as well. Brian Keefe, again, new coach. And J.J. Redick, very, very new coach. Just got a contract literally this offseason. First ever head coaching job, so it makes total sense that he is at the very bottom of this list of we do not know enough. And, I mean, the 25 through 22 are the coaches that you wouldn't be enthused over. So Doc Rivers being in that tier, I completely agree with, because let's face it, the Milwaukee Bucks throughout the entirety of last season, they were very, very pitiful. After they got Doc Rivers, they became worse, and it just really, it hurts me. It hurts me to see that they really just fired their head coach Griffin for absolutely zero reason, just to get a coach that has a championship ring, only to be worse than without the coach that you previously had. They shot themselves in the foot there. Now, in the tier 7 category of the people that look promising but still a little bit too early, I do understand Kenny Atkinson being in there, as well as Green and Jamal Mosley, because they recently, like, their teams had just had stellar years. Kenny Atkinson and Jamal Mosley in particularly. Mosley is the coach for the Orlando Magic, and the Magic, along with the Cavs, they really, really surprised everybody by making it. Well, the Cavs didn't surprise most people by making it in the postseason, but Orlando really did. And not only that, how they played in the postseason as well was also very impressive, moving the series to 7 games. Even though they lost in the first round, they're inexperienced. It's their first postseason in a while, so I don't really hold it to them that much. And the team and the coaches that are like in the middle of the pack, like, you know, Jason Kidd, Taylor Jenkins, and Michael Malone, I think that makes total sense, because, you know, it's sort of like they're good, but it's like they do have their moments where it's like, what are you doing? Especially Jason Kidd. Jason Kidd is like a flip-flop coach. Like, sometimes you like him, sometimes you don't. Sometimes he makes really questionable decisions. Sometimes they actually work. And that's sort of why it's in the middle. I understand that being in the middle of the road. And then the next tier is the living legend. Obviously, Greg Popovich deserves that. He is a living legend. His resume as a coach speaks for itself, along with his winning percentage as a coach. And then the floor raisers, Mike Brown, Chris Finch, Joe Mazzulla, Thibodeau, Budenholzer, and Ime Udoka. I agree with all of those as well. They definitely do raise the floor for a lot of their teams and their starting lineups, and they do know how to utilize their starting lineups rather well. Now, Thibodeau, you might argue, could be a little bit insane And the reason why I say insane is because he plays his men like 46, 48 minutes. He does play the starters a lot of minutes. And that ends up wearing and tearing them, and it's one of the big reasons why a lot of the players on the Knicks in the postseason ended up getting injured. But aside from that, he's created a fantastic roster with this Knicks team and a great rotation along with that as well. So, and obviously the rotations, they get a little bit worse towards the end, but overall, very, very good job that he's been doing there with the Knicks. And then the Wonderkins, I have no idea what on earth that means, and I have no idea what on earth the tier really means. I mean, the Jazz, they were all right. They weren't that impressive, and part of that could be because of the players. But the Thunder head coach, Mark Daigneault, forgive me if I completely botched that last name, he's definitely should be in the, that's a very funny name, Wonderkins, but I do understand he definitely should be very high in the rankings of the coaching, because this young team, being the youngest team to make the number 1 seed and make the postseason, nothing short of impressive. And then the elites with Tyronn Lue, Steve Kerr, Rick Carlisle, and Nick Nurse. I believe that they're dubbed the elites mainly because they've won championships before. And Ty Lue, I feel like Tyronn Lue is a little bit too high. Again, Joe Mazzulla should be in the tier 2. He should be in the top 10 of this list. I'm sorry to say it. Joe Mazzulla deserves to be here. He won the championship. A coach that wins the championship immediately belongs in the top 10. And, Steve Kerr with the Warriors, you can make arguments that Steve Kerr's rotations are very weird with the Warriors, especially recently with Team USA. You can argue that Steve Kerr's rotations are incredibly questionable. Tyronn Lue, you can argue that the team really fell apart towards the end of the season. And, whether that be on the players or whether that be on their execution, it doesn't matter. You're still part of the team and you're still the coach, and you still have to sort of uplift your players to that sort of standard. They were winning competently enough in the middle of the season only to crash out towards the end. Rick Carlisle for the Pacers, completely understand. That pacing with that speed that they play with, the quickness and the efficiency on that team, 100% deserves to be in this tier and definitely deserves to be in the top 10. And Nick Nurse with the 76ers, I'm definitely not entirely sure on that, but they were able to keep their postseason hopes alive even though Joel Embiid ended up succumbing to injury. So I'm going to let that one slide. Those are my opinions on the coaching list, and obviously Eric Spoelstra being number 1 is an obvious number 1. No questions, no ifs, ands, or buts. The only coach that still has their job after coaching LeBron, and really that speaks for itself, honestly. So that's all I have for this segment. Let me know in the comments if you guys agree with this list, if you guys don't agree with this list, if you guys agree with my opinions, if you guys don't agree with my opinions, and with that out of the way, we can go into the break, and then after this short break, we're going to go into the third segment where I look at an article talking about LeBron's shortcomings, which is going to hurt my soul because how dare somebody talk about my glorious king and LeBron James, the greatest basketball player ever. So I'm just going to go ahead and talk a little bit about the article right after the short break, so be sure to stay tuned.
Looking for your daily fix of sports talk without having to pay for it? GSMC Sports Network is available on YouTube. Just search GSMC Sports Network. Get your fix of daily sports talk shows on YouTube, absolutely free. NFL, college football, NBA, MLB, MMA, UFC, fantasy football, and so much more. GSMC Sports Network has shows running all day long, with new sports shows starting every 2 hours. Just like on your favorite cable sports channel, except GSMC Sports Network is absolutely free. Just search GSMC Sports Network on YouTube to catch one of your new favorite shows, like the GSMC College Football Podcast, Chip Shot Football Podcast, Hoops and Heels Women's Sports Podcast, GSMC Basketball Podcast, and so many more. Check it out for yourself. GSMC Sports Network, now available on YouTube absolutely free. Search GSMC Sports Network on YouTube right now.
And we are back with the third segment of the GSMC Basketball Podcast presented by the GSMC Sports Network. And in this third segment, we are going to be looking at an article which is titled former NBA player names LeBron James's one shortcoming that makes Michael Jordan the GOAT. So we're going to have a little bit of a GOAT debate here. And I sort of try to avoid this because a GOAT debate could honestly take up every single one of these segments. Because you can go on and on and on about who you think is the greatest of all time. And I could go on and on and on about who I think the greatest of all time is. And we would be here forever. So we're only doing a little bit of it. Probably not going to do another GOAT segment again. But this article definitely caught my interest because I'm a little bit curious what this former NBA player had to say about the king, the GOAT, LeBron, the king, the greatest of all time, whatever you want to call him, LeBron James. And so the article starts out, the debate over the greatest basketball player of all time, often narrowed down to Michael Jordan and LeBron James, remains a heated topic among fans and critics, like I just said. Recently, a former NBA player offered his perspective on this debate by pointing out a specific shortcoming in LeBron James's game that solidified Michael Jordan's status as the GOAT. So, the former NBA player is none other than Muggsy Bogues. Muggsy Bogues, one of the shortest guys to ever play in the NBA. This is his opinion. Interesting. So, according to him, the main difference between LeBron and Jordan lies here we go again. The killer instinct. Again, with this killer instinct argument, we hear this all the time, that Jordan exhibited throughout his career. Bogues, who himself stood at 5'3", argued that while LeBron is a remarkable all-around player, he lacks the intense drive to win that defined Jordan. Bogues stated on Adam Lupus's podcast, skill-wise, there's no other than MJ, and Kobe was the second coming of that and had that. And him being the 2.0 version, MJ, and being able to have the mindset, that same killer instinct mindset that MJ had, that's what separated him from a lot of guys. Quote, LeBron James is one of the greatest basketball players ever to play this game, longevity-wise and statistic-wise. But skill set, I'll always give it to Jordan. MJ was a killer. LeBron is nothing like him. And to that, I say, wrong. The article continues going on saying, Jordan's killer instinct is reflected in his ability to perform exceptionally well under pressure, especially during important playoff moments. His perfect 6-0 record in the NBA, again with the 6-0 record in the NBA Finals and 6 Finals MVPs awards, highlights his clutch performance. In contrast, despite his 4 championships, LeBron James has faced criticism for his 6 Finals losses. So this is where the argument goes, and this is where I say we can go on all day, and I'm only going to go on for a little bit, and mainly going to talk about that killer instinct comment, because I think that killer instinct comment is absolutely ridiculous. Because how is it that you cannot say LeBron has a killer instinct in the postseason? He's arguably one of the best postseason performers that the league has ever seen. Did you guys not watch the 2018 NBA playoffs? Did you guys not watch the 2017 NBA playoffs? Did you not watch the 2016 NBA playoffs when he came back 3-1 in the finals? The first time that's ever happened in NBA history against the best team ever assembled in NBA history, a 73-win team. You're telling me that LeBron doesn't have a killer instinct after coming back 3-1? Are you serious right now? No, that makes 0 sense. The killer instinct that these guys are everybody talks about is just the give me the ball at the end of the game and I'm going to win it for you. Acting like LeBron hasn't already done that several times in the postseason. And there are so many moments. In fact, there are so many mirror moments. LeBron's career has been so long. He has multiple moments of doing the exact same thing on so many different teams. It's too much to count. Like, I could be here all day giving you every single clutch moment that LeBron has had in the postseason. Like, LeBron closed out the game against Detroit in the final minutes when he played 50 minutes in overtime and was able to win by 2 points. And he was the only reason why the Cavs even won that game, because towards the end of that game, he was the only one doing any kind of scoring. In that entire series, his average was 25 points per game, 9 rebounds, and 8 assists. And get this, that kind of performance is considered mid for LeBron, which is ridiculous to even think about just how crazy that is. Not to mention other moments that he's had the killer instinct. The 2 game winners against Toronto in 2018, the biggest example of that, averaging 34 points per game, 11 assists, and 8 rebounds. How is that not killer instinct? Shot 55% from the field, didn't shoot all that well from 3, but at the end of the day, he didn't really need to because he was just that good. And there's so many other moments that you can name. In fact, being the only player in the history of the NBA to ever beat the Celtics after the Celtics took a 2-0 series lead. Never done before. That's killer instinct right there. How are you going to tell me that he doesn't have killer instinct? It doesn't make any sense. That argument is invalid. Just because Michael Jordan had the persona that he was going to take the last shot. Sure. Like, LeBron understands he doesn't have to be the one to take the last shot, and that is all right as long as you make the right play. People always criticize him for making the right play because they want him to take some crazy, ridiculous fadeaway shot to win the game, when that's not even how the game is supposed to be played now. Like, it really doesn't make any sense, and I really just don't understand it. And a lot of people are going to say, oh, well, Ray Allen had to bail him out against the San Antonio Spurs in Game 6, but people immediately forget when LeBron scored 16 points in that fourth quarter to even put Miami in a position to tie the game and send it into overtime and even win the series. Or how in Game 7 of that same series, LeBron closed the game out in Miami by hitting that super clutch mid-range jump shot over Kawhi Leonard. There's so many killer moments that he has that everyone just sweeps under the rug because of 1, 2, or maybe 3 little incidences that he's had. And when people immediately point at LeBron James not having the killer instinct, they immediately look at his finals performance in 2011. The only finals performance in LeBron's career where it was his fault. And we act like Michael Jordan hasn't had seasons or postseasons like that where he underperforms or he struggles. Because I'm sorry to say it, when Michael Jordan returned to baseball, like when he returned back from baseball, that loss, that finals, not even that finals loss, that playoff loss when he lost to the Orlando Magic doesn't even get talked about. It gets shoved under the rug because he came back from baseball, despite the fact that he was still at 100% in the NBA. It really doesn't make any sense, this killer instinct argument that all of these old NBA players and all of these old NBA fans keep making, because just because LeBron is okay with not taking the last shot doesn't mean he doesn't have a killer instinct, because there are so many moments where LeBron legitimately carries the team on his back and holds his own. In fact, literally just recently in the Olympics, who did they give the ball to at the end of the game? A team surrounded by the best players in the world. Kevin Durant, Steph Curry, Devin Booker, Anthony Edwards, all of those players at the top tip of their game. And they gave the ball to LeBron. And LeBron delivered against South Sudan. He delivered against Serbia. He delivered against France. He delivered against every single team that he went up against in that Olympics. And you're telling me he doesn't have a killer instinct? Really? That argument is terrible. I cannot stand that argument saying that he doesn't have a killer instinct. Really does not make any sense to me. Like, they're praising Michael Jordan for being selfish with the ball and taking the final shot. Yes, I would very much want Michael Jordan taking the final shot over anybody, no questions about it. But if there's somebody open, I think I would rather see him pass the ball to that player that's open instead of taking a shot over 3 people. Like, he could make it, sure, but I mean, like, 3 people, really? It's really one of the biggest problems that I have, because if LeBron were to do that, if LeBron were to take a shot over 3 people, everybody would immediately question him and be like, what the heck is he doing? What kind of shot is that? Everybody would immediately question him. But if it was somebody like Jordan or if it was somebody like Kobe, nobody would question that because they're like, oh, okay. It doesn't make any sense to me. But aside from that, that's really all that I had on this debate, and that's LeBron's shortcoming. It's really not a shortcoming. It's far from it. Like, that completely wrong. Muggsy, but I'm sorry to say it, but I think that is just completely wrong. Let me know in the comments what you think, but LeBron definitely has that killer instinct, whether you like it or not. So aside from that, that's it for the GOAT debate. We're not going to be touching on that subject for a short while, unless you guys want me to touch on that subject. Let me know in the comments what you guys would want. If you guys really want me to have a full-fledged GOAT debate, we might as well do that now while the NBA season has not started. But we're going to go ahead and go into the fourth segment where I talk about the players on each and every team that has the most to prove. Now, we're going to go through a majority of them. I don't think I'm going to be able to get through all 30 teams because, again, like 30 teams is a lot to ask in talking about for only 24 minutes. So it's really like we're gonna have to see. We're gonna have to see how many players I can get through, and we'll just continue doing this into the fourth segment. And I'll be right back after this short break. So be sure to stay tuned.
For the best and latest podcasts available anywhere, go to the podcast app on your cell phone and type in GSMC to access free content-rich podcasts on health and wellness, book reviews, sports, entertainment, relationships, social media, movies, technology, finance, and even weird news. Subscribe and download the GSMC Podcast Network's family of shows, available everywhere podcasts are found.
And we are back with the fourth segment of the GSMC Basketball Podcast presented by the GSMC Sports Network. And in this fourth segment, we are going to be looking at every single NBA team, and we are going to be listing a player on each of those teams that has the most to prove. And this was inspired from a Bleacher Report article, and so I'm just going to be talking about the players that they chose and whether or not I agree with that, or whether or not I don't agree with that, or whether I think there should be somebody else in there. I will make that decision on my own. But for the most part, I do legitimately agree with Bleacher Report's list, so I'm just going to go ahead and talk a little bit about that in this segment. It's going to be, I believe this list is going to be in alphabetical order just based off of, the first letter of each team. So, the first team is going to be Atlanta because Atlanta Hawks. The next team is going to be Boston because of B. And then the next team is going to be Brooklyn. You guys understand the idea, all right? So we might as well go ahead, start out with the Atlanta Hawks. And obviously, Trae Young is going to come to everyone's minds. He definitely has the most to prove for this franchise. He's a 3-time All-Star. He's the leader. He was a one-time leader of an Eastern Conference Finals appearance, and ever since then, the Hawks have sort of been in that mid-tier of in the Eastern Conference. They haven't been great, but they haven't been bad either, which really puts them in a tough spot. And for his entire career in Atlanta, the only NBA franchise that he's been on, it's seemingly up. His time there is sort of up in the air. And they already split the backcourt duo with DeJounte Murray and Trae Young this offseason, and they could pivot toward a youth-focused rebuild around Jalen Johnson, Onyeka Okongwu, excuse me if I mess up that last name, Dyson Daniels, Kobe Buffkin, and Zachary Resacher, the number 1 overall pick in the draft. So Atlanta may have already taken that plunge, if not for the fact that San Antonio Spurs have control of the Hawks' next 3 first-round picks. That buys Young a little bit more time to convince this front office he should remain their centerpiece. So it's the real question is, are they going to move on from Trae Young, or are they going to stick with him and try and see if he can be that number 1 option on Atlanta? And in my opinion, he definitely can be. He's already the franchise's leader in assists for the Atlanta Hawks, which is fantastic in of itself, considering how many years he's only played for the Hawks. And really, like, he's been the brightest point of the entire Hawks and their future. So I would be very surprised if they decide to move on from him, but at the same time, Trae Young also wants to win. So he really has a lot to prove, to see, like, if he can lead the Hawks into the postseason this year without getting injured, then there's a good chance that they might actually try to bank on him, and they're willing to build a team around him and try to make it farther into the postseason. Because again, ever since that one Eastern Conference Finals appearance, this team sort of hasn't been all that. Next team on the list, as I said before, the Boston Celtics, and the player with the most to prove is Jaden Springer, and the entire Celtics lineup had a lot to prove before winning this championship. Jaylen Brown had a lot to prove. Jason Tatum had a lot to prove. Drew Holiday had a lot to prove. So did Kristaps, and so did Derek White. But after they won the championship, they have nothing left to prove. They did what they had to do, accomplished what they needed. All of it, they've done it. And it's the only thing that you really need. All you need is to win a championship, and it absolves you of all the things that you've done. Now, if they didn't win a championship, Jason Tatum would be on this list, and he's big, and he would need to prove that he's worth all the money that the Celtics are giving him. But given that he won the championship with the help of Jaylen Brown, definitely deserves all of that money. And excuse me. So, despite this, really the only competent piece for the Celtics is their starting lineup. Despite having support players like Sam Hauser and Peyton Picard, they've already proven their worth. So really the only other player that needs something to prove is this one right here. So like he's sort of on this list by default. And like, you know, the options, they're really, really limited. Like Kristaps Porzingis, he already proved himself. Everybody already proved themselves. So really, like, and not only that, but his leg surgery also proved to be rather successful. So you have to sort of shift the spotlight down to Jaden Springer and sort of see if he is going to be the NBA quality player that the Celtics hope that he can be, and if he can contribute enough for the Celtics, because everybody else on the team already has proven themselves. So he's sort of on this list by default. Now, the next player on this list for the Brooklyn Nets is Cam Thomas. He, by far, has a lot to prove for this season. Now, he's a fantastic scorer, but we have to see that in the starting lineup, and we also have to see if if his offense can prove to be so valuable that it could make up for his lack of defense. Now, obviously, he averaged 25 points per game in 36 minutes per 36 minutes with the Brooklyn Nets. He was a fantastic scorer, and when Kevin Durant and Kyrie were on Brooklyn, everybody was hoping that Cam Thomas would get some time to shine and score the ball the way that he does. His point production is probably going to climb even higher now that Mikal Bridges isn't there and he's mainly getting all of the touches. He is a bucket. The only thing that's wrong with Cam Thomas, in my opinion, is his facilitating. I really feel like his facilitating could be a little bit better. For being a point guard, it's a little bit lackluster, in my opinion. And, I mean, Nick Claxton actually had a problem with Cam Thomas at one point because he didn't pass the ball. I didn't really have a problem with it because Cam Thomas ended up making the three-pointer, but it could lead to some chemistry issues down the road. And so, again, his point production is really, we're going to have to see if that point production can increase to maybe 30 points per game, or if it's going to go down to like maybe 17 like Jordan Poole. Because this is sort of like a Jordan Poole situation that we're facing in right now. So he's eligible for an extension, but that feels unlikely given the questions surrounding his supplemental skills and the state of the franchise, according to Bleacher Report. So in a layman's terms, there could be tens of millions of dollars on the line for this season, and it will take more than a spike in scoring to be able to secure that money. So he needs to prove that he can be more than just a scorer. He needs to be a facilitator as well and do more for the Brooklyn Nets. And do more in a sense like LaMelo Ball, where not only is he a pretty competent scorer, but he's also a fantastic floor general and a facilitator. And he is the kind of guy that can make your teammates better and can make your team better based off of his decision making. And so obviously LaMelo, he's going to have a lot to prove in this season. And hopefully he doesn't get injured. Like, that's really been the thing. Can LaMelo Ball stay healthy? And that's what he sort of has to prove in this offseason. And there's arguments that have been made that LaMelo Ball, when he was healthy for Charlotte, they were able to make the play-in. And maybe, LaMelo is actually the answer. But now this is sort of when Melo has to prove it. And he is a former All-Star and social media juggernaut, but he's also someone who, in the words of ESPN, plays an empty calories game. So essentially, he puts up good numbers, but it's like they're not entirely that valuable. Like, LaMelo Ball's deep threes and highlight dimes are fun to see, but he's never been as efficient as you'd want an offensive focal point to be, as he shoots 42% from the field for his career. And it's not like his effort and execution on the defensive end is exactly tone setting, according to this article. So he just has to prove that he can put up meaningful numbers and valuable numbers and bring wins to the team, as opposed to just being a flashy point guard that can pass the ball really, really well and do amazing flashy passes. So it's like they want to see if he can be Steve Nash or if he's Jason Williams. That's actually, I think that's one of the best comparisons that I could have done right there. I think that's literally it. They're trying to see if he's Steve Nash or he's Jason Williams, because Jason Williams, he was a highlight reel machine. If you guys saw him play, White Chocolate, he's ridiculous. And but obviously, Jason Williams and Steve Nash, completely different players with completely different careers. And while Jason Williams was flashy and a great passer, Steve Nash was rather cool and collected and also a great passer, but he was able to deliver it in wins. Not really in playoff wins, but in regular season wins. So that's really where the comparison is coming in, for those of you guys that didn't understand. But for those of you guys that did understand, let me know in the comments what you guys thought of that comparison, because I thought that was peak right there. But enough about that. Next player on this list before I go into a short break is Patrick Williams for the Chicago Bulls. And obviously, Chicago's roster is really it's up in the air. They're rebuilding. I have no idea whether or not Zach LaVine is going to be part of it. I have no idea whether or not they're going to trade Zach LaVine, but Zach and Vucevic, they do have tickets out of town as soon as they convince a contender to come and get them. Kobe White has a breakout campaign to repeat, and they did recently get Josh Giddey, so there is a chance that he does show some flashes. In my personal opinion, I hope he doesn't. But Javon Carter needs to reestablish himself as a role player as well. But excuse me. So there's a lot of players on the team that does have some things to prove, but I feel like Patrick Williams is definitely the highest and the one with the most to prove for this season. He was picked 4th overall in 2022, and really we haven't really heard much about him, and he hasn't really sort of delivered as a 4th overall pick I feel should. And not only that, they also doubled down on the commitment by giving him a $90 million contract this summer. And so now he has to sort of prove that he can be that top 4 pick in the draft. And whether it'll work or whether it won't is still up in the air, and that's really the big question. So he was getting Kawhi Leonard comparisons, and now it almost feels like a joke that he is compared to Kawhi Leonard. So he really needs to step that up. So that's it for the 4th segment. Now I'm going to move on to the 5th segment, where I actually continue with this list, since I do have a couple more players that I feel like have a lot to prove, and I do want to go over this list a little bit more in depth. So I will be right back after the short break, continuing on with this list, so be sure to stay tuned. And we are back with the fifth and the final segment of the GSMC Basketball Podcast presented by the GSMC Sports Network. And in this segment, we are going to continue on with the list of players that have the most to prove going into this next season. And I'm probably going to get through maybe I'd say about 5, maybe 6 players on this list, and then we'll move on from there. And let's see, I don't know. You know what? I'm going to start picking the more popular players, okay, that have a little bit more to prove. And so instead of just generic names like Patrick Williams, you're going to see big names now. So this list might be a little bit more intriguing to you guys as opposed to just listing off some role players. So the first player that we have here, or not really the first player that we have here, but the next player on this list that I think has something to prove is the Cavs' Evan Mobley. Now, Evan Mobley, there were talks that once Donovan Mitchell and Darius Garland, over in the offseason, there was a little beef going around, at least on the internet, and there was some Cavs drama, debating on whether or not they were going to trade Darius Garland or whether or not they were going to trade Donovan Mitchell, but the Cavs insisted on running it back with the entire lineup. But when those talks were in motion, a lot of Cavs fans and a lot of people were speculating that Evan Mobley was going to be the centerpiece of the offense. And Evan Mobley, he is a very competent power forward and a rather underrated defender in my opinion. And he sort of has to put the whole world on notice in this season. So I sort of feel like this is where he has a lot to prove. And given his performance in the final game of the postseason when he dropped over 30, definitely needs to prove that he can be a solid second or even a third option for the team. And let's see, going on with with Bleacher Report's article, Mobley still suits up alongside Jared Allen, so there's a need for Mobley to harness an outside shot. And that's also going to be another thing that he has to prove, because he is a pretty good mid-range shooter, but in terms of three-point percentage, he isn't entirely there. And if he's able to develop a three-point shot at the power forward position, it can really increase his value. Since Mitchell arrived and pushed the Cavs into the Eastern Conference's top-tier teams, there is a rush for Mobley to sort of blossom into the team and sort of become that third or second option for them. And it's hard to see the Cavs even entertaining championship dreams without this happening from Evan Mobley. And like I said before, Mobley is a fantastic defender, and he's also able to clean the glass and finish around the basket as well. And again, this two-way talent is going to be very, very important for the Cavs and the make or break for their success. And on top of that, barring injuries aren't an issue. Now, the next player on this list is for the Dallas Mavericks. Obviously, it's Klay Thompson. He's faced a lot of scrutiny over the offseason, going 0 for 10 in the final game of the Golden State Warriors season. And really, he sort of, that one performance has lost his reputation, or has enabled the media to change his reputation as a choker and not a relatively good shooter and washed. Even though I don't entirely agree with that. Sure, his defense might not be the same, but I do think he's still a very valuable shooter. He just has to prove that for the Dallas Mavericks now. And obviously, this could be a make or break for the championship that the Dallas Mavericks are pursuing, because they recently just came off of a finals appearance, and now the next step is going to be winning the title. And now we have to sort of see if they can do that with Klay Thompson, and he's going to have to prove to be a very solid either third option or an incredibly good shooter. And I'm sure that in this season he can most likely turn the critics, because he's going to be playing with a fantastic playmaker in Luka Doncic, and maybe he can turn some heads and hopefully shoot 40% from the field again. But again, Klay Thompson, he desperately needs to prove himself to all of the critics that keep typing in the chat. Remember, Klay Thompson went 0 for 10 in an elimination game. Remember, Klay Thompson went 0 for 10 in an elimination game. You only see, that is the only thing that you see when you think about Klay Thompson. That's the only thing that you see when talking about Klay Thompson. And that's really a very it's just, it's sad to see it because he was so feared in the NBA when I was watching. Like, one of the most feared shooters that the NBA has seen, period. And it's amazing how quickly his reputation changed like that. Now, the next player on this list is for the Denver Nuggets, and that's Jamal Murray. And he was just given a huge contract, $208 million, and now he has to play like it. Jamal Murray is arguably the most underrated guard in the entire NBA. He has a championship, but he has never made an all-star appearance in his entire career, which is insane to think about because this man dropped a triple-double in the NBA Finals. The fact that he has never been selected for an all-star appearance is, again, it's very insane. So this is sort of, he has to prove himself that he can be a $208 million player, and maybe he can make the all-star team because he has to play great. And, like, they rely on his success in the postseason. Like, he's really, really, really good in the postseason most of the time. And most of the time, again, like, that's against the Lakers that he's really good in the postseason, but he is very good, and he has so many good postseason memories that a lot of people remember from the bubble, not to mention when he won the championship. And again, he needs to prove that he is that $208 million player and a very valuable second option, which I already think he's a second option. I already think he's a valuable second option, but can he do more? Because he's given way more money now. And we'll go on to the next, which is the Detroit Pistons. Now, the player with the most to prove on Detroit is everyone. Like, quite frankly, everybody has a lot to prove on Detroit. This is a team that needs to show everybody that they are not as horrible and as abysmal and as atrocious as they were last season. The Detroit Lions were able to get more wins than the Detroit Pistons, and the Pistons play 82 games. That says a lot about the Pistons, and that says a lot about how mediocre they've been, and that's not even mediocre, how bad they've been. And again, it's like, it's just everybody on the team needs work, not just Cade Cunningham. Everybody on the team needs to prove themselves. They can't be having that bad of a season that they had. They just can't. I mean, 14 wins in total last season. That is absolutely disgusting. And again, like, you can't do that. Now, this is probably going to be the same thing like for the Wizards, because quite frankly, I think all of those players on that team, they have a lot to prove. But yeah, the Detroit Lions, counting the postseason as well as the regular season, they were able to get more wins than the Detroit Pistons. Like, they finished 12-5 last season, and they were able to win in the wild card, and then they were also able to win in the divisional round when then they went over to the NFC conference, and they were able to accumulate, that's 14 wins in the season, the same amount of wins as the Detroit Pistons, despite the fact that the Pistons played 82 games. And that's horrible. Like, that is just appalling. Like, the fact that an NFL team has the same amount of wins as an NBA team, it's disgusting. And that cannot happen again. It should not happen again. So the entire Pistons roster has something to prove. So that's all that I have time for today. So that's going to be it for the fifth segment. Thank you. I'm going to continue on with this list most likely tomorrow and actually for the majority of the week, because there are a lot of players that have a lot to prove on every single team. So I'm just going to continue on with this list. It's going to be an ongoing thing. Let me know in the comments whether you guys agree with it, whether you guys don't agree with it, whether you guys want to hear more from it, or whether you guys don't want to hear more from it. Just let me know. Thank you so much for tuning in to the GSMC Basketball Podcast, presented by the GSMC Sports Network. Your support means a lot to us, so remember to subscribe to the show, leave a positive review. It really does make a difference. We also invite you to follow us on Facebook, Twitter, TikTok, and Instagram for more content and updates. As usual, we love to hear what you guys have to say during the show, whether you guys have a hot take, whether you guys have a burning question. We are all ears. So if you really want your comment or question to get noticed, you can go ahead and use Super Chat, and you can click the $ below the chat box. Send in your comments, donations that way. Really helps the show. If Super Chat isn't really your thing, then you can always use the link displayed below the ticker, gsmcpodcast.net, and then you can donate to the show that way. Really helps the show, makes it much more interactive between myself and you guys, and your comments are guaranteed to get mentioned next time on the show when you do. And thank you so much for tuning into this podcast. I am your host, Nelson, and as always, take care.
Let's go. I wake up to a little bit of drool on my pillow, feel like it's gonna be a bad day. Yeah, I'm tired of shit, and the coffee ain't hit yet, damn ain't